We have this picture in our heads, a linear one. It starts with a hunched over ape man. He slowly stands up straight. He gets a little less hairy, his forehead a little bigger. He picks up a rock. Then he sharpens it. Then he makes a spear. Finally, he becomes us. Clean, clever, modern. In this story, we are the destination, the pinnacle. Everyone who came before was just a stepping stone, a beta test. But that story is wrong. It's too simple. The real story is a messy family drama. It's a tree with many branches, not a straight line. And on those other branches were other kinds of people: Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus. They weren't just waiting for us to show up. They lived, they survived for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than we have so far. They spread across continents. And that brings up a really important question. Were they just getting by, or were they innovators too? Were they as innovative as our own early ancestors? To even start answering that, we have to agree on what innovative means. We aren't talking about inventing the internet or building a skyscraper. For our ancient relatives, innovation was something much more fundamental. It was figuring out a better way to chip a rock to get a sharper edge. It was learning how to control fire instead of just running from it. It was developing a new hunting strategy that let you take down bigger, more dangerous animals. Innovation was anything that gave you a better chance of seeing the next sunrise. And it happened on a timescale we can barely comprehend. A new tool design might be the hot new thing for 100,000 years. Let's start with the most famous of our relatives, the Neanderthals. For a long time, their name was an insult. A Neanderthal was a dumb, brutish caveman. This image came from the first skeleton they found, which belonged to an old man riddled with arthritis. He was stooped and crooked, so they thought all Neanderthals were. We now know that's completely false. They were incredibly successful. They dominated Europe and parts of Asia for over 300,000 years through brutal ice ages. You don't do that by being stupid. Their technology proves it. They had a toolkit we call Mousterian. It was a huge leap forward from what came before. They perfected a technique called Levallois. Think about it like this. Instead of just bashing a rock until you got a sharp piece, the Levallois method was about preparation. You'd carefully chip the edges of a core stone, shaping it just right. Then, with one final, precise strike, you could pop off a perfect flake. A flake that was sharp, standardized, and ready to use as a knife or a spear point. This requires abstract thought. You have to be able to see the tool inside the rock before you make it. You have to plan a sequence of actions. This isn't brute force, this is craftsmanship. They used these tools to become apex predators. We know they hunted big game. Mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant cave bears. This wasn't a matter of one guy with a pointy stick. This required cooperation, it required planning and communication. They would have needed to work as a team to corner or trap these massive animals. They knew their environment intimately, they knew where the animals would be and when. They were masters of their world. They also controlled fire, they used it to cook, to stay warm, and to keep predators away at night. A hearth wasn't just a convenience, it was the center of social life. It was a place to share food and safety. This is a behavior we often associate with us, but Neanderthals were doing it long before they ever met a Homo sapiens. But maybe the most surprising evidence of their complexity isn't in their tools, but in how they treated each other. We have found Neanderthal skeletons with healed, debilitating injuries. One famous individual from Shanidar Cave in Iraq had a crushed eye socket that would have left him blind on one side. His arm was withered and had been amputated. He was also partially deaf, and yet he lived for years with these injuries. He couldn't have survived on his own. Someone had to have fed him, protected him, cared for him. This isn't the behavior of a mindless brute. This is empathy. It's a complex social bond. And what about their minds? Did they have art, religion, symbolism? This is where things get tricky. They didn't paint grand murals like the ones our ancestors made in Lascaux or Chauvet. But they did things that hint at a symbolic world. They collected eagle talons, drilled holes in shells, and maybe wore them as jewelry. They seem to have had a preference for certain colors, like black and red pigments. The most stunning piece of evidence comes from deep inside a cave in Bruniquel, France. Here, someone snapped stalagmites from the cave floor and arranged them into two large rings. They did this almost 176,000 years ago. The only hominins in Europe at that time were Neanderthals. This structure serves no practical purpose. It's not a shelter. It's not a trap. It's deep underground, far from the entrance. It feels ceremonial. It's a intentional modification of their world to mean something. We don't know what it meant, but it was clearly important to them. It's one of the earliest examples of hominins building something. They also seem to have buried their dead. The evidence is debated. Was it a ritual burial, or did they just dump bodies in pits to keep hyenas away? But at sites like La Chapelle aux Saints, individuals were found carefully placed in pits, sometimes in a flex position. It suggests a deliberate act, the first step toward a ritual farewell. So, were Neanderthals innovative? Absolutely. They created new technologies, they had complex social lives, and they were beginning to explore a symbolic world. Their innovation was steady, reliable, and incredibly effective for their environment. But let's zoom out further. Before the Neanderthals, there was Homo erectus. If success is measured in longevity, then Homo erectus is the undisputed champion. They were around for nearly 2 million years. Think about that. Our own species, Homo sapiens, has only been around for about 300,000 years. Homo erectus was a true pioneer. They were the first of our relatives to leave Africa and spread across Asia and into Europe. Their signature invention was the Acheulean hand axe. You've probably seen pictures of them. They are teardrop-shaped stones flaked on both sides to a point. At first glance, they might seem simple. But they were the Swiss Army knife of the Stone Age. You could use it to butcher an animal, dig for roots, chop wood, or throw it as a weapon. And this design was a staggering success. We find these hand axes almost unchanged for over 1 million years, from Africa to England to India. This presents a paradox. Is a tool that lasts 1 million years a sign of incredible innovation or a sign of stagnation? The answer is probably both. The hand axe was a good enough technology. It worked so well in so many different situations that there was little pressure to change it. Homo erectus wasn't pushing the envelope of technology every generation. Their pace of innovation was geological. But creating that tool in the first place was a massive cognitive leap. It requires symmetry, planning, and a strong mental template of the final product. Some of these hand axes are far more beautifully crafted than they need to be, suggesting a sense of aesthetics. And erectus gave us perhaps the most important non-stone tool innovation of all, the control of fire. It was likely them, or a very close relative, who first tamed the flame. This changed everything. Cooking food makes it easier to digest and unlocks more nutrients. It kills parasites. Fire provides warmth, allowing hominins to move into colder climates. It provides light, extending the usable day. And it keeps predators at bay. Fire remade our relationship with the natural world. It was the first step toward us shaping the environment rather than just being shaped by it. So, Homo erectus was clearly innovative. They invented a killer app, the hand axe position, and the ultimate survival tool, fire. Their innovation was about stability and expansion. They found a successful formula and used it to conquer the world as they knew it. Now let's turn to our own lineage, early Homo sapiens. We appeared in Africa around 300,000 years ago. For a long time, our technology looked a lot like the Neanderthals. We made Mousterian-style tools. If you just looked at the stones, you'd have a hard time telling who made what. We were living in similar ways, hunting similar animals. But then, starting around 70,000 years ago, something began to change. And by 45,000 years ago, it was undeniable. We call it the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, or the Creative Explosion. It wasn't that we suddenly got smarter. Our brains were the same size, but our behavior became radically different. Our toolkits became much more diverse and efficient. We moved from flake-based tools to blade-based tools. A blade is a flake that is at least twice as long as it is wide. This technology lets you get far more cutting edge from the same piece of stone. It's a more economical way of thinking, and we didn't just stop there. We started making tiny stone tools called microliths. These were small, sharp pieces that can be fitted into a spear or an arrow shaft. This is the birth of composite tools. A spear thrower, or atlatl, is a perfect example. It's a stick with a hook that acts as a lever, allowing you to throw a spear with much more force and accuracy. This wasn't just a better spear, it was a new mechanical system. We also started using a much wider range of materials. We were carving bone, antler, and ivory into needles, fishhooks, and harpoons. The invention of the needle meant we could sew fitted clothing, which was a huge advantage in cold climates. It meant better tents, better bags. It was a revolution in textile technology. And then there is the art. This is the most dramatic difference. Suddenly, the human world is flooded with symbolism. We see it everywhere. In caves across France and Spain, our ancestors painted breathtaking images of horses, bison, and mammoths. These aren't just doodles, they are sophisticated works of art, showing perspective and movement. They created statues like the famous Venus figurines with exaggerated female features. We don't know if they were fertility symbols, goddesses, or something else entirely, but they were clearly important. They carved intricate patterns on their tools. They even made music. We found flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory that are over 35,000 years old. They could play complex melodies. This explosion of art and technology is what truly sets early sapiens apart. A Neanderthal might have drilled a hole in a shell. A sapiens would create a necklace with hundreds of beads arranged in a pattern and bury it with their dead. The scale and complexity are on a completely different level. We weren't just surviving in the world, we were interpreting it. We were creating worlds of our own in myths, art, and music. So, what happened? Why did our innovation suddenly kick into high gear? It probably wasn't one single thing. But a leading theory is that it has to do with social networking. Neanderthals seem to have lived in smaller, more isolated groups. Their populations were spread thin. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, may have formed larger, more interconnected social networks. Think of it this way. In a small, isolated group, one brilliant person might invent a new kind of fishhook. But if that person dies before they teach it to enough people, or if their small group gets wiped out by a bad winter, the innovation is lost forever. In a large, interconnected network, that same fishhook can spread from group to group. Someone in the next valley might see it, copy it, and then even improve upon it. Innovation isn't just about having smart individuals, it's about having a system that can preserve and build upon new ideas. This is called cumulative culture. It's like a ratchet. Each new idea clicks into place, and the culture can't slide backward. The next generation starts from that new, higher baseline. This process allows for exponential growth. The innovations of early sapiens, the spear thrower, the bow and arrow, the sewing needle, weren't just a collection of separate good ideas. They were a system of knowledge passed down and improved upon that gave us an incredible adaptive edge. Word language was likely the software running on this social network. While Neanderthals almost certainly had language, perhaps ours was different. Maybe we developed a more complex syntax that allowed us to communicate more precise and abstract information. We could tell stories about the past and make detailed plans for the future. We could explain, in great detail, how to make a spear thrower. We could create complex mythologies that bound together large groups of people who weren't directly related. A shared belief in a tribal ancestor or a spirit of the mountain can unite thousands of people, allowing for cooperation on a massive scale. So let's go back to the original question. Were they as innovative as early humans? If we're talking about Homo erectus, the answer is probably no. Their genius was in their stability. They found a solution that worked, and they stuck with it for 1,000,000 years. Their pace of change was glacial. If we're talking about Neanderthals, the answer is much more complicated. They were absolutely innovative. They developed sophisticated tools. They hunted cooperatively. They cared for their sick, and they had the glimmerings of a symbolic life. They were intelligent, adaptable, and masters of their world for a very long time. For much of their existence, their technology was on par with our own ancestors living at the same time. But they were not innovative in the same way as Homo sapiens were, especially after that creative explosion around 45,000 years ago. Our innovation seems to have been different in kind. It was faster, more explosive, and it built on itself. We didn't just make a tool, we made a tool to make other tools. We didn't just have a society, we had a culture that was designed to accumulate and share knowledge across space and time. The difference wasn't a simple matter of one group being smarter than the other. It might have been a small difference in cognition, perhaps in working memory, or a penchant for tinkering. Or it might have been a difference in social structure, with our larger networks acting as an engine for cultural evolution. Or, most likely, it was a combination of all of these things. It's a bit like comparing a brilliant, solitary craftsman with a bustling city full of workshops. The solitary craftsman might be a genius, he might create masterpieces, but the city can produce more, innovate faster, and spread ideas more quickly. The city has a resilience that the lone craftsman lacks. One workshop might fail, but another will take its place. Homo sapiens became that bustling city of ideas. In the end, we are the only ones left. That's a powerful argument for our brand of innovation being, in some ultimate evolutionary sense, more successful. Our ability to rapidly innovate allowed us to adapt to every environment on the planet, from the frozen tundra of the Arctic to the rainforests of the Amazon. When we came into contact with Neanderthals and other hominins, our larger populations and perhaps more efficient technologies might have given us a competitive edge. We might have simply outcompeted them for resources, but we shouldn't see this as a story of victory. It's a story of loss. We are the last twig on a once bushy branch of the hominin family tree. Those other innovators, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, weren't failures. They were different experiments in how to be human, and they didn't completely vanish. We know from our DNA that our ancestors interbred with them. Many modern humans carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. People in parts of Asia and Oceania carry Denisovan DNA. Their legacy is inside us. They were not a beta test. They were people. They were clever and tough, and they found their own ways to solve the problems of life. They innovated, they created, they cared for each other. Their way of being in the world was different from ours. Their pace was slower, more deliberate. Our path became one of constant, accelerating change. One path ended and one continued. But for hundreds of thousands of years, there was more than one way to be an innovative human on this planet. And that's a humbling thought.